What is the New Testament and who wrote it? Part 1 of a 4-part series. This is Den on Religion. Hey peeps, it's Dr. B with 10 on Religion. Many people say they believe in the Bible but don't know the history behind who wrote it or how it was formed. We're going to focus on the Christian scriptures, which came to be known as the New Testament. It is one of the most culturally influential set of documents in the Western world. It contains 27 ancient documents, now called books, all originally written in Greek, the language of the second generation of believers, which is a different language from Jesus and the first generation, which was Aramaic. We're going to take a look at answering 3 questions in this 4-part series. First, what are these documents and who composed them? Second, how were they transmitted? And third, why these documents? How were they selected? This part and the next will focus on the first question. What are these documents and who composed them? The contents of the New Testament include 4 Gospels, Acts, which is history with a clear theological agenda, 21 epistles, 13 letters with Paul's name on them and 8 others, and the Apocalypse of John, known by its common trade name of Revelation. This episode will specifically focus on the epistles. The next episode will focus on the Gospels and other writings. The first documents to be written were the letters of Paul, so we're going to start there. Paul's letters are grouped into 3 groups by historians. The 7 undisputed letters, the 3 Deutero-Pauline letters, and the 3 pastoral letters. The 7 undisputed letters, which are considered genuine by almost every historian, are 1 Thessalonians, Galatians, Philippians, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Romans, and Philemon. These were all likely written during the 50s or maybe late 40s, which was 2 or 3 decades after the execution of Jesus. The Deutero-Pauline letters have Paul's name on them, but the authorship is controversial. Many historians do not think they were written by him. This is because of the differences in vocabulary, writing style, and theology of ideas presented, which are all considerably different from the 7 letters known to be written by Paul. These 3 letters are 2 Thessalonians, Ephesians, and Colossians. If they weren't written by Paul, this means they were forged. A little bit more on that in a minute. The last group of Paul's letters, called the pastoral letters, include 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus. Most historians believe these were not written by Paul. They were written at a much later date than Paul lived because they mention church hierarchies that did not yet exist when Paul was alive. They were likely written 20 to 30 years after Paul died. This is important because it means the teachings do not represent Paul's views, especially regarding 1 Timothy's negative view of women in the church, which is clearly non-Pauline in nature based on his views of equality in Galatians 3:28. Now, a few quick comments about forgery. It actually was quite common in the ancient world. For a real-world illustration, there was a 2nd century famous physician and author in Rome named Galen. One day, he overheard a conversation passing by a bookseller's stall. 2 men were arguing over a book written by Galen, but Galen knew he didn't write the book. Despite being initially proud they were arguing over him, he later got a little upset that someone was trying to make money by writing and selling a book under his name.
About to end this man's whole career.
After he went home, he composed a small book called How to Recognize the Books of Galen. So in general, why forge a letter in the days of the Roman Empire? 3 main reasons. Profit motive. Libraries paid cash for original documents. Use a teacher's name to honor them. But the most common reason is to get one's views out into the market. For example, in Christianity, there was a 3rd Corinthians letter whose author claimed to be Paul, but the document was written in the 2nd century, 50 to 100 years after Paul died. The author didn't seem to care because as long as it had Paul's name on it, his views were being presented under the auspices of the name Paul. A similar thing happened with the Deutero-Pauline and the Pastoral letters. So to sum up, there are 13 letters in the New Testament with Paul's name on them. 7 are likely written by him, and the other 6 were probably not and are considered forgeries by most historians today. The rest of the letters go by different categories but are often called the general epistles. These are Hebrews, James, 1st and 2nd Peter, the 3 letters of John, and Jude. The letters of James and Jude were originally thought to be written by Jesus' brothers, but most modern historians think that is unlikely, as there is no historical evidence that they ever would have learned Greek. The authors make no claim to be any particular James or Jude, and if they were brothers of Jesus, that likely would have been mentioned. Reservation for 2? Maybe you don't recognize us. We're Jesus' brothers. I'd like a corner table. Window view, please. It's unclear which James or Jude wrote these letters, as these names were common names. The letter to the Hebrews was claimed by some early Christian leaders in the 2nd century to be written by Paul, but few, if any, historians think that is the case today. There is no name on the letter, and it reads more like a carefully constructed essay or sermon rather than a letter. Many early Christian leaders weren't convinced that Paul wrote it either. The 3 letters of John were not written by the Apostle John, Jesus' friend, but possibly a different John. This is known through the technical grammar usage of the Greek language in those documents. There's no author listed in the documents themselves. In some instances, an ancient author did not need to name himself because his readers knew perfectly well who he was and did not need to be told. This is almost certainly the case with the letters of 2nd and 3rd John. These are private letters sent from someone who calls himself the elder to a church in another location. It is safe to assume that the recipients of those letters knew who he was, even if we probably don't know that today. The 2 letters of Peter were also not likely to have been written by Peter, Jesus' friend. This is especially clear for 2nd Peter. Because it claims that Paul's letters are already in circulation and on a par with scriptures according to 2 Peter 3:16. But this could not have been during Paul's lifetime. Both Peter and Paul were killed during the reign of Nero, who died in 68 CE. It gets a little trickier with 1 Peter. Peter, Jesus' friend, likely never learned to read his own language of Hebrew, much less read Greek, much less compose a rhetorical letter in Greek. We know this from another New Testament document, as Acts 4:13 describes Peter as unlettered, the ancient word for illiterate. The writer of 1 Peter was very familiar with the Greek version of the Hebrew scriptures called the Septuagint and assumed the audience knew it as well. The real Peter would have only been familiar with the Hebrew version of the scriptures, not the Greek version. One common method to attempt to explain this is called the secretary hypothesis, whereby Peter dictated this letter to another person who then wrote it down. But this was really for the upper class only, for short compositions of 1 page or less. But this letter was more like an essay put in letter form with careful reasoning and historical evidence of Jewish scripture quotations. The letter does not read like a Greek translation of Aramaic ideas, but in original Greek composition. Co-authors were usually named. There was no instance in the ancient world of somebody dictating a letter to be written in another language. It just didn't happen. The argumentation and presentation of the letter only works in the Greek language. Also, the letter alludes to the destruction of Jerusalem, which happened after Peter died, so it's less likely that Peter spoke Aramaic to dictate a letter to a Greek translator, and more likely the letter was a forgery written sometime after the year 70 CE when Jerusalem was destroyed. Now, just because many of the letters in the New Testament have contested authorship issues like forgeries or misattributions doesn't mean that they're not important. They are all very important as it gives historians some of the earliest written insights into the formation of the Christian communities during the first century. In the next episode, we'll talk about what the Gospels are, along with some of the issues there, and also the rest of the other documents in the New Testament. I hope this vlog has helped you better understand this topic. Until next time, stay curious. If you enjoyed this, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. This is 10 on Religion.